Chris and Emily stepped into the motel room, side by side. They swiftly shed their clothes, diving straight in without any idle chatter or preliminary gestures. I pushed it across the table to Emily and clarified that I had employed it to puncture all the condoms she had been using for the last 2 months. I mentioned to her that she had used 48 rubbers in merely 2 weeks, a quantity I never imagined she would go through. Welcome to Addy Story, where we share real-life stories that touch the heart and inspire the soul. Subscribe now to join our community, relax, and dive into the stories we have for you. Enjoy. I had been on the road for what seemed like an eternity, at least 2 hours, heading towards the Marriott in Richmond. My wife, Emily, was attending a conference there, and I decided to surprise her with a dinner. However, to be honest, there was a more urgent motivation behind the journey. For the last 3 months, an unsettling suspicion lingered in my mind that Emily might be involved with someone else. Whenever she embarked on one of these professional journeys or educational seminars, her return was always delayed beyond what was anticipated. This evening, I was resolute in my intention to witness her actions firsthand, if necessary, and to finally dispel the uncertainties that were consuming me from within. Emily and I have shared 14 wonderful years of marriage, and we are blessed with 2 incredible children, Lily, who is 12, and Ethan, who is 10. They spent the night at my mom's place. Emily and I got married immediately after high school, following a couple of years of dating. She exuded a vibrant energy, her long brown hair cascading around her, and her figure effortlessly capturing attention. However, a shift occurred a few months back. Minor details began to irritate me, leaving me with a sense of discomfort. I aimed to avoid appearing overly suspicious or envious, so I chose to keep my worries to myself. The proximity of this conference provided an ideal chance for me to make an unexpected visit. Upon arriving at the hotel, I presented my suit bag to the front desk and introduced myself as James Carter. I informed the clerk that my wife, Emily, was at the insurance conference in room 214, and she had mentioned I could pick up a key from the front desk. Once my identity was confirmed, the clerk passed me the key, and I made my way to the elevator, a flutter of nerves accompanying me throughout the journey. Thoughts swirled in my head, contemplating the scenario of encountering her. I pondered my approach. Would I knock or simply enter? Would she be by herself in that moment? As I walked down the hallway, I resolved to use the key and uncover the truth of the situation. In an effort to remain silent, I carefully inserted the key card into the door, easing it open, and there she was, poised at the desk with her briefcase ajar, sifting through a stack of documents. She spun around, her expression a mix of surprise and disbelief at my presence. I swiftly conveyed that I had some spare time and figured I would stop by to take her out for dinner. Emily appeared truly delighted to see me, inviting me to stay the night and expressing her anticipation for the companionship. She approached and pressed her lips against mine. And in that moment, I understood that my scheme to catch her had utterly failed. However, as I playfully remarked about us spending some time together before dinner, she flashed a mischievous smile and proposed we share a brief, intimate moment before she stepped into the shower. She even assured me of an entire evening dedicated to my desires afterward. A wave of relief washed over me as I considered the possibility that I might have simply been overthinking things. We shared a fleeting yet intense moment, and then Emily slipped away into the bathroom for her shower. I inhaled deeply, attempting to dispel my previous doubts, and settled onto the bed. Seated in that moment, my gaze fell upon Emily's toiletry bag, resting on the dresser. I chose to look for some aspirin to alleviate the headache I had developed from all the driving. But instead of discovering pills, I stumbled upon something that made my heart drop: a pack of 6 condoms. I found myself sitting there, gazing at the condoms, my thoughts swirling around me. Following Ethan's arrival, Emily began using birth control pills, yet they caused her to feel nauseous. That was the moment I chose to undergo a vasectomy, and from that point forward, we found ourselves free from the need for any contraceptive methods. What could possibly explain the presence of condoms in her bag? The realization struck me with overwhelming force. Emily was unfaithful. Nothing else could account for it. What was my next step supposed to be? I couldn't simply walk away from this. My thoughts darted through countless possibilities, and then I took an action that I can't say I feel good about. I sifted through her bag and discovered a safety pin, the sort she always had ready for any wardrobe mishaps. With precision, I employed it to create small punctures in the center of each condom before returning them to their original places. As Emily wrapped up her shower, I picked up my phone and dialed my friend, Mike. He's the type of person who would go to great lengths for a friend, without hesitation. I mentioned to him that I required a small favor, nothing too outlandish, just a simple phone call. I conveyed my desire for him to ring me in roughly an hour and act as if there was a crisis back home. I mentioned an issue akin to a burst pipe at the school, something that required my urgent focus. Mike nodded readily, mentioning he would reach out around 7. The thought of spending the night with Emily had lost its appeal, especially after the revelation I had just encountered. The idea of being close to her sent shivers down my spine, so I decided to use Mike's call as a reason to step away and reflect during the drive home. As Emily stepped out of the bathroom, I found it difficult to meet her gaze. Every part of me yearned to face her in that moment, to seek the truth I so desperately needed. Yet I restrained myself, aware that letting anger take over would serve no purpose. I had to maintain my composure and determine my next step. We made our way to the hotel's dining room, and I tried my hardest to maintain a facade of normalcy. Yet internally, I was unraveling. Emily appeared completely unaware of the storm brewing within me as we took our seats at the table. I suggested she choose anything she liked, but she merely shrugged and replied that she wasn't particularly hungry. She chose a petite filet mignon and proposed we pair it with a bottle of rosé. Once we submitted our order, I found myself unable to hold back from exploring the situation a little further. I inquired whether she felt content with our union. Without hesitation, she affirmed that she was. She elaborated on how we had a lovely home, 2 wonderful children, and a husband who adored her. She expressed that she couldn't desire anything beyond this. I nodded in agreement, yet her words struck me like a blow to the stomach. How could she make such a statement while secretly maneuvering behind my back? I confess that there were moments when I questioned if I was doing enough to ensure her happiness, yet I highlighted how fortunate I was to have her as my partner. I even joked that at times I had to pinch myself to truly believe it was real. Emily playfully referred to me as a silly goose, assuring me that my journey to see her was unnecessary worry, as she felt happy and content. The dinners were served, and we engaged in light conversation during the meal. Yet my thoughts wandered to distant places. The discovery consumed my thoughts endlessly. Just as the plates were being cleared, my phone rang. It was Mike, arriving precisely as expected. I stepped away to the lobby to take the call, ensuring I lingered for a few moments before returning to the table. Upon my return, I informed Emily that Mike had reached out to notify me about a burst pipe at the school, emphasizing the urgency of my need to return there promptly. Emily's expression shifted, leaving me uncertain whether her disappointment was sincere or if she was merely irritated that her night had been abruptly interrupted. In any case, it appeared that my decision to remain or depart held little significance for her. She was bound to encounter repercussions regardless of the path she chose. As we made our way back to the elevator, an unfamiliar man emerged and greeted Emily warmly, as if they were long-lost friends. He presented himself as Chris Bennett and noted that he had visited her room earlier, but there was no response. He reached out his hand and remarked, "Emily mentions you constantly. My name is Chris." I managed a smile and extended my hand, even though it was a challenge to feign the niceties. As we ascended in the elevator, an unsettling knot in my stomach grew tighter. This was the individual, correct? This was the man with whom she was unfaithful. As soon as we returned to the room, I faced Emily and candidly expressed my desire for her to resign from her job. The thought of her collaborating with Chris had become unbearable for me. We had discussed it previously, but I felt it was essential to emphasize that this was not open for discussion. She retorted that she wasn't going to quit, and that I needed to move past my paranoia regarding her and Chris. She portrayed it as if I were the one at fault, rather than herself. Following a swift, chilling kiss, I snatched my bags and exited the hotel, my thoughts swirling with fury and a sense of betrayal. The entire journey back, I couldn't rid myself of the vision of Chris visiting Emily's room. When I finally arrived at the house, I was in shambles. I despised her for her actions, and I loathed myself for my inability to intervene. Thoughts of divorce consumed me, yet lacking concrete evidence left me feeling utterly defeated. I was aware of my wife's infidelity, yet I found myself paralyzed, unable to confront the situation. 2 days later, Emily returned from the conference, behaving as though everything was completely ordinary. Her cheerfulness was almost grating, intensifying my frustration. I found myself compelled to take action. As she focused on unpacking, I found myself unable to resist the urge to take another look at her bag. There it lay, the final condom, bearing the minuscule puncture I had made. How many had she experienced in merely those few days? The idea turned my stomach. On that Saturday, Liberty Insurance, the company where Emily was employed, organized a picnic for its employees and their families. The children buzzed with anticipation for the day ahead, while I found myself feeling quite the opposite. A nagging feeling told me that a few of her co-workers were aware of the affair, and the mere idea of being the target of workplace chatter or crude humor filled me with dread. I might have been a bit overly cautious, but given the circumstances, it was hard to shake that feeling. Emily thrived in the moment, sharing laughter and engaging in lively conversation with her colleagues, Chris included. They didn't display their affection openly, yet there was an undeniable intimacy between them that I couldn't overlook. It felt as though the world faded away whenever they spoke. I made an effort to remain inconspicuous, avoiding any spotlight on my presence. A woman I had not encountered previously, Rachel Mitchell, presented herself, stating that she was Chris's wife. She was breathtaking, with flowing auburn hair and striking blue eyes, the sort of woman who seemed to have walked straight out of a fashion spread. For a brief instant, I found myself truly perplexed. How could Chris betray someone as wonderful as her? I had always held Emily in high regard, cherished her even, but Rachel was an entirely different matter. We engaged in friendly banter, and after some light conversation, we decided to seek out a more tranquil location for our discussion. We found ourselves on a few benches by the lake, distanced from the picnic area, allowing us to converse freely without the risk of being overheard. As I observed her, it was clear that Rachel was preoccupied with something significant. She paused, evidently wrestling with the decision to address the topic. I chose to simplify things for her. I revealed to her that I had discovered the affair only that week. Her face instantly reflected a sense of relief. She confessed that she had been aware for roughly 2 months and had made the decision to initiate divorce proceedings. She had gone so far as to enlist the services of a private investigator to collect evidence. Rachel shared that her attorney had recommended reaching out to Emily to either testify or provide a notarized statement regarding the affair to bolster her case. I inquired about the evidence she possessed, and she referred to photographs and recorded phone calls, although there were no videos at this point. She was confident that the evidence she possessed was more than sufficient to construct a compelling argument. She then inquired whether I would consider utilizing some of the same evidence in my own divorce case. She also indicated her intention to take legal action against Liberty Insurance for negligence. It seems she possessed accounts from fellow employees who were aware of the affair, yet chose to remain inactive. Rachel was resolute in her quest for retribution against Chris and Emily, no matter the cost. She proposed that we collaborate, pooling our evidence, and I concurred. Joining forces was a logical choice. Before we returned to the picnic, Rachel extended an invitation for me to come over to her house the following day. As Chris prepared for his morning golf outing, she considered it the perfect opportunity to review all the information she had collected. Her residence was located at 26 Hemlock Avenue in Greenville, merely a brief drive from our location. We shared a chuckle, aware that our gathering wasn't precisely a date, yet it seemed as though we were embarking on this journey together now. Upon our return to the picnic area, it appeared that our absence had gone unnoticed by anyone. A sense of relief washed over me, as if a glimmer of hope had emerged from the chaos. The following morning, as anticipated, Emily informed me that she was going out for some shopping and would be away for a few hours. Once she was gone, I took the kids to my mom's house and headed straight to Rachel's. She welcomed me at the entrance, exuding her usual poise, and guided me into her study. The space exuded warmth, featuring a spacious leather couch and a computer monitor perched on the table ahead, displaying an unoccupied motel room. Rachel gestured for me to take a seat and kindly offered me a beverage. I chose a soda, a Pepsi to be exact, and then inquired about what was happening. Rachel shared that we were on the verge of witnessing Chris engage in a round of golf, presented live and in vibrant color. She suggested that I might be familiar with the caddy accompanying him. When I inquired about how she had arranged this, she nonchalantly stated that it had set her back around $1,400, but she was confident that Chris would eventually take care of the expense one way or another. The session was intended to span a few hours, prompting her to suggest that I settle in comfortably. She had popcorn and nachos prepared, and she assured me that I would receive a DVD of the entire event afterward. She confessed that although she was reluctant to witness what was about to unfold, she also felt an undeniable urge to be present for it. For the next 20 minutes or so, we engaged in light conversation. Rachel revealed additional insights into the affair, presenting me with photographs, playing audio recordings, and displaying various documents. The more she revealed, the more I understood the profound connection between Emily and Chris. It was devastating, yet it provided the validation I sought. Then, just as Rachel had foreseen, the monitor sprang to life with a flicker. Chris and Emily stepped into the motel room, side by side. They swiftly shed their clothes, diving straight in, without any idle chatter or preliminary gestures. The video was sharp, although the audio was somewhat muddled. I was in disbelief as I stood there, my wife just a few feet away, with another man by her side. Observing Emily and Chris in that moment was among the most unsettling experiences I've ever had. Rachel, attempting to ease the atmosphere, remarked on how rare it is to encounter a figure like Emily's. I managed to put on a smile, yet truthfully, I was at a loss for words. It felt like a dream, and I found myself reluctant to continue observing. After a brief moment, I reached my limit. I glanced at Rachel and expressed that I had no desire to continue watching. I sensed she wasn't particularly enthusiastic about carrying on either. Rachel let out a heavy sigh and conceded, acknowledging that the experience was quite excruciating to endure. We chose to halt the video, recognizing that the attorneys possessed sufficient evidence at this point. I admitted to Rachel that witnessing my wife in that state, particularly with her sitting so close to me, was something I found incredibly difficult to bear. Everything about it seemed off. Rachel nodded in agreement, fully grasping the situation, and proposed that we explore an alternative activity. Her mention of the koi ponds in the backyard brought me a sense of relief. That was far more enticing than enduring another second of the video. Her eyes sparkled with enthusiasm when I expressed curiosity about her hobby, and she appeared truly eager to share it with me. As we strolled into the backyard, I found myself reflecting on how this afternoon was unfolding so much more favorably for me than it was for Emily. The koi ponds were truly remarkable. Rachel possessed 3 of them, and each was increasingly remarkable compared to the previous one. She detailed the pumping and filtration systems, and I was captivated, particularly given my experience in plumbing. I extended my assistance whenever she required it, driven by a genuine curiosity to deepen my understanding of the koi ponds. Time spent with Rachel was a delightful addition, though it lacked any romantic undertones, at least for the moment. We lingered for a few hours, the minutes slipping away as we engaged in conversation about everything except our unfaithful partners. It provided a refreshing diversion. As we made our way back indoors, the screen displayed an empty motel room, indicating that Chris and Emily had departed. The moment had arrived for me to return home. Rachel escorted me to the door, assuring me she would reach out when Chris had his upcoming golf game. She recommended that I bring Lily and Ethan along to visit the koi ponds. It was a lovely idea, a glimmer of hope to anticipate amid all this turmoil. As I drove home, a tumultuous blend of feelings washed over me, relief intertwined with anger, and a flicker of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, I could navigate through this. The upcoming weeks proved to be challenging. Each time Emily stepped into the shower, I couldn't help but glance at her bag. And without fail, I discovered a fresh stash of condoms inside. I was perplexed about when she managed to utilize them all. It felt as though she was leading a hidden existence that was entirely unknown to me. I held on to that safety pin on my keychain, poised to create openings whenever I stumbled upon another hidden treasure. On the days when Chris was off playing golf, I would take the kids over to Rachel's place. They cherished their visits to the Koi Lady, as she was affectionately known. They would create illustrations of the fish and eagerly present them to Emily upon our return, yet she never realized that Rachel was Chris's spouse. It was nearly comical how unaware she seemed. Emily appeared grateful that I could entertain the kids while she was, as she described it, otherwise occupied. I attempted to engage Emily in conversation a few more times regarding her job and her relationship with Chris, but each attempt met with the same frosty dismissal. The second instance was especially brutal, as she took jabs at my masculinity and suggested that I was the source of the issue. It hurt, yet it also provided me with a rationale for all my actions. I began to create reasons to steer clear of intimacy with her. And as our time apart increased, so did my sense of distance. Then, one evening, Emily revealed a shocking truth. She mentioned that she had been feeling quite overwhelmed recently and believed it would be beneficial to take a break from work to spend some time with her sister, Susan, for a few days, possibly even a week. She mentioned that I had been putting in a lot of effort with all the overtime and late nights, and she believed it would be an opportunity for me to unwind a bit as well. She presented it as though she was granting me a kindness by embarking on this journey. That night, sleep eluded me as my thoughts surged with all the tasks ahead. At last, the time had arrived, and I was compelled to take action. The following day, once Emily had departed for her rest and recuperation trip, I began to make my preparations. I found myself in the difficult position of having to convey the circumstances to my parents, acknowledging my shortcomings as a husband. Their support was remarkable, as they readily offered assistance in every possible manner. The children were overjoyed to spend time with their grandparents, and my father's truck would prove useful for transporting Emily's belongings out of the house. On Thursday morning, I embarked on a 3-hour drive to the initial clinic where I believed Emily might seek help. However, upon my arrival, I encountered an impasse. That brought me to my final choice, the Family Planning Center. I entered the room, making an effort to exude confidence, and informed the receptionist that I was James Carter, sent by my wife, Emily, to complete some consent forms. I feigned ignorance, pretending I didn't know the precise name of the document, but I brought up that it pertained to comprehending the process and consenting to refrain from any legal claims. The receptionist acknowledged with a nod, glanced at her computer screen, and verified Emily's identity. She mentioned that Emily's sister had already signed on her behalf, but insisted that my signature would hold more weight. She passed the file to me, and I swiftly affixed my signature just below Susan's. The appointment is set for Friday morning at 11 a.m., and it's advised to arrive an hour in advance. I inquired about any outstanding payments, but the receptionist confidently informed me that Emily had settled the entire $800 in cash. I expressed my gratitude to the receptionist and exited the clinic, a mix of relief and anxiety swirling within me. At this moment, all the pieces were perfectly aligned. The welcome I received upon arriving at Susan and David's home was, as expected, quite uncomfortable. Emily appeared truly taken aback upon my arrival, inquiring about my presence there. I mentioned to her that my parents had kindly offered to look after the kids for a few days, which led me to take some sick leave and plan a visit to them. I noted that I required some time to relax, much like she did. The atmosphere grew still, and I could almost visualize the thoughts churning in their minds. I placed them in a challenging situation, and now they needed to find a way to navigate it. Susan exchanged a knowing glance with David, prompting him to slip away into the kitchen alongside her. Emily made an effort to maintain a cheerful tone, yet I sensed her underlying tension. Upon David's return, he proposed that we venture out on the lake the following day with his friend Steve's boat, seeking a brief escape from it all. I concurred, expressing that a day by the lake seemed ideal, despite my lack of desire to actually attend. The following morning, Steve was already there with the boat as I firmly communicated to David that I had no intention of leaving. As he prepared lunch and filled the cooler with beer, I lingered by the passenger door of his truck. When David inquired about my plans, I candidly informed him that I had reconsidered. I had no intention of spending the day on a boat with him and Steve. I suggested he embrace the situation, knowing he'd have to face Susan upon his return, and I had my reservations about her mood being anything but pleasant. David made an effort to persuade me to join him, even throwing in some mild expletives and a couple of half-hearted threats. However, after 5 minutes of discussion, he understood that I wasn't going to change my stance. At last, he conceded defeat, and he and Steve departed without my presence. After they disappeared from view, I returned to the house, brewed a cup of coffee, and switched off Emily's cell phone. I reached out to my dad, an early riser, and we engaged in a 2-hour conversation, all while the persistent call-waiting tones faded into the background. I assumed David was attempting to contact Susan to alert her, but I had no intention of allowing that to occur. Eventually, Emily and Susan rose, and I bid farewell to my dad, steeling myself for the inevitable confrontation that lay ahead. As Susan's cell phone buzzed back to life, she and Emily realized they had only about 5 minutes left to reach the family planning center. I polished off the last of the coffee and set about brewing a new pot for the two of them, fully aware that I was bracing myself for some significant repercussions. Emily shot me a look of irritation and inquired about my lingering presence. I mentioned that I wasn't feeling up to fishing and decided to spend the day with them instead. I proposed that we discover a lovely spot for lunch together, considering I needed to depart that evening regardless. Emily swiftly dismissed the notion, stating that she and Susan had their own plans and preferred not to have me join them. She highlighted that their encounters were limited to just a few times each year, and that I had an entire week to share with her. I refused to accept it. I resisted, expressing that after traveling such a distance, the minimum she could offer was to give me half a day. Susan, visibly exasperated, exited the room to place a phone call. Emily sat there, her expression a portrait of exhaustion, as if the weight of the world had just crashed down upon her. Susan's voice pierced through the air, her frustration directed at David over the phone, as if he had crossed an unpardonable line by abandoning me. Emily made one final attempt to dissuade me from attending, insisting that their plans excluded me and that my presence would only complicate things. I gently expressed my desire to understand their plans, allowing me to determine if I wished to join them or pursue another option. I playfully asked if they were planning to meet up with some guys, but she swiftly dismissed the idea. Emily shared that they intended to shop for personal items such as bras, underwear, and nightgowns, things they preferred to keep private from a guy's presence. I shrugged and mentioned that most of those shops were located in the mall, allowing me to effortlessly seek out other activities while they tried on their selections. I even suggested treating them to a lovely restaurant for lunch to compensate for any trouble caused. Susan emerged once more in the doorway, her eyes fixed on me with a piercing glare, silence enveloping the moment. Emily realized that the debate was futile, so she conceded, stating that she needed to get dressed. Approximately 20 minutes later, they descended the stairs, visibly annoyed, yet accepting the reality that I would be accompanying them. I had a feeling that Susan's phone call was probably directed to the family planning center, perhaps to rearrange the appointment, since I mentioned I would be leaving that night. They likely thought they could rouse me and make their move once I was gone. I firmly took the wheel, determined to ensure I wouldn't be left behind in some random place. We paused at a service station, and I leisurely filled up the tank, inspected the oil and water, and polished the windshield. It was likely the most time I'd ever dedicated to a standard car upkeep, and they merely lingered, seething. Upon arriving at the mall, I chose to park at a distance, ensuring we would enjoy a lengthy stroll to the entrance. Upon entering, I allowed them to proceed with their activities, maintaining a respectful distance while ensuring they were aware of my presence. It appeared that they were not having any fun whatsoever. Much of their time was devoted to hushed conversations and exchanging exasperated glances. They picked up a few items, yet it was evident they were merely going through the motions to create the illusion of shopping. I observed them closely, yet I found myself lacking any genuine interest in their purchases. The crucial aspect was that I had successfully postponed the unavoidable. The hour for the appointment had slipped away, and I realized Emily would need to find another time to meet. I never meant to prevent her from following through, but complicating things for her was my attempt to regain a semblance of control. At midday, we gathered in the central atrium of the mall, precisely as we had arranged. We enjoyed a delightful lunch at the Applebee's, and afterward, we made our way back to the house around 2 p.m. The journey in the car was thick with tension, yet words were scarce. I sensed their anger directed at me, yet it didn't faze me in the slightest. After weeks of uncertainty, I finally sensed a shift in my favor. Upon returning to the house, I reached for a beer and sank into the couch, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. After a few hours, David came back, only to endure a relentless verbal barrage from Susan that stretched on for a solid 30 minutes. Once she finished, he quietly slipped away, vanishing until dinner time. Later that evening, once the dishes were cleared away, I turned to Emily and suggested we have a private conversation in the kitchen. Susan cast a disdainful glance my way, remaining silent as she and the other person made their way into the living room. Emily remained troubled by the day's occurrences, and it was clear that engaging with her would not be a simple task. Yet I was prepared. I cut to the chase, reiterating my desire for her to leave her job and break things off with Chris Bennett. Her teeth were gritted with such intensity that I feared they might shatter, and she appeared to be on the verge of unleashing her fury upon me. She firmly stated that she was done with the conversation, urging me to refrain from mentioning it again. Emily was exasperated with my persistent questioning and pointed out that I already understood the answer would remain the same. She presented me with a choice: either shift the topic or walk away. I stood my ground. Instead, I delved into the manila envelope I had brought along and extracted a legal-sized envelope. Within the envelope lay the divorce papers. I informed Emily that I had requested her at least 10 times in the last 2 months to leave her job and break things off with Chris, and each time she had declined. I recommended that she complete the paperwork and send it off. I even included a self-addressed stamped envelope to make things easier for her. I informed her that she could have a lawyer review them if she wished, but I was finished waiting for her to reach a decision. Emily's expression contorted with fury. She leaned across the table, her voice low and sharp, insisting that I couldn't end our marriage simply because she refused to leave her job or cut ties with someone I disapproved of. She insisted that valid reasons for divorce were necessary, and I found myself lacking any. She had no doubt about it. She then advised me to return home and sort myself out, reminding me that she was my wife and had no plans to abandon her home or family simply because I was unhappy with her job situation. I held my tongue for the moment. Instead, I delved into my envelope and retrieved a collection of photographs. I arranged 6 photographs on the table, each capturing Emily and Chris in different compromising scenarios. I inquired whether that constituted sufficient grounds for divorce. Emily's complexion drained of color, and for an instant she appeared as though she might faint. However, rather than expressing any regret, she began to yell at me, demanding that I cease placing the photos on the table. She leveled accusations at me, claiming I was spying on her, and hurled every insult imaginable my way, sneaky, underhanded, and more. She insisted on understanding why I hadn't approached her directly and labeled me as someone who derived pleasure from such matters. She claimed that my actions made her feel unwell. In that instant, my cell phone chimed. My dad was on the line, informing me that he would be there in roughly 10 minutes with Emily's things. I ended the call and faced Emily, who remained visibly upset. She inquired about who had called, and I replied with a sense of calm that my dad was delivering her belongings to Susan's place. I mentioned that I had already replaced the locks at our home, and that if she had left anything behind, she could inform me, and I would collect it for her. She remained motionless, caught in a moment of disbelief as I presented her with the title to her car, now officially hers. I handed her an envelope with half of the funds from our shared bank accounts, totaling around $200. I detailed the visitation schedule she would have with the children. Once a week, with the option for an overnight stay once a month, contingent upon her providing a notarized statement acknowledging the affair. I mentioned that I possessed a DVD capturing her and Chris's little meeting at the Starlight Motel from May 10th. The duration spanned 2 hours, revealing all that was captured in the images. I gathered the photos from the table, informing her that I hadn't captured them myself, as I wasn't particularly invested in her pursuits. The thing I found most unbearable was the deception. At last, I retrieved the final object from my envelope, the safety pin that had been my constant companion. I pushed it across the table to Emily and clarified that I had employed it to puncture all the condoms she had been using for the last 2 months. I mentioned to her that she had used 48 rubbers in merely 2 weeks, a quantity I never imagined she would go through. Her face flushed a deep crimson as she absorbed my words. She referred to me as a wretched weasel and claimed that my actions were the most contemptible thing she had ever encountered. I remained unfazed. I expressed to her that the most contemptible act was betraying my trust. I acknowledged my own foolishness, yet it was she who had betrayed the sanctity of our marriage. I informed her that I needed to leave as my dad was arriving in the driveway. As I rose to depart, I pointed out that she had not offered a single apology or displayed any regret for her actions. I bid her farewell and extended my best wishes for her upcoming procedure, making sure to note that it was scheduled for Monday. At that moment, the tears finally flowed. As I stepped out of the room, Emily's tears began to flow. Susan hurried in to offer her solace as David trailed behind me onto the porch. He gazed at me, attempting to comprehend the whirlwind of events that had just unfolded, and remarked that I couldn't discard a 14-year marriage over what he referred to as a misunderstanding. I confronted him, inquiring why Emily had decided to visit him and Susan under those circumstances. David cast his gaze downward, visibly grappling with the reality before him. After a brief pause, he quietly expressed his regret and extended a hand to assist with unloading the truck. We completed the unloading in roughly 10 minutes, all the while Emily remained in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. I was indifferent to the reasons behind her tears. In my view, it was insufficient and arrived at the wrong moment. In the following week, Emily and Chris both found themselves dismissed from Liberty Insurance. Emily declined to sign the affidavit that Rachel's lawyer had asked for. Yet my lawyer confidently assured me that our case was robust enough without it. After that night, Emily fell silent. Not a single word reached me. She didn't even bother to visit the kids, yet they appeared unfazed by her absence. They were connecting with Rachel, and we shared a significant amount of time together as a family. Romance was not on the agenda for Rachel and me, at least not at this moment. Our attention was solely on navigating our divorces and ensuring the well-being of our children. In the coming months, I delved deeper into COI than I ever imagined, and I relished every moment of the journey. At last, after a lengthy 4-month journey, both divorces reached their conclusion. Emily accepted hers quietly, while Chris struggled fiercely, thrashing and shouting. He lost it all: the house, the investments, and found himself burdened with a substantial monthly alimony to Rachel. A few days prior to Christmas, Emily arrived at the house bearing gifts for the children. I chose to maintain a courteous demeanor and refrain from actions that might disrupt the festive atmosphere. She lingered for roughly 2 hours, embodying the role of a devoted mother, and then departed as silently as she had arrived. We avoided discussing the separation or the infidelity. It felt like those events had simply vanished into thin air. Once she departed, an unusual feeling of resolution washed over me. After 2 months of the house being on the market, I finally settled in with Rachel. Chris accepted a position in Tulsa, and Emily accompanied him there. 4 months passed, and then Chris vanished, leaving Emily in the dark about his destination. She ultimately returned to live with Susan, who was navigating her own divorce after David accepted a position on the North Dakota oil fields. David mailed Susan the divorce papers, and the two sisters leaned on each other, both feeling abandoned by the men they had tried to build their lives around. In the meantime, everything was unfolding positively for Rachel and me. We shared a sense of ease, and she cherished my children, who reciprocated her affection. We cherished every moment we had together, and by June, we found ourselves immersed in plans for our wedding. We had transcended the pain of our past unions and were eager for a new beginning. Life had at last found its way into a serene, joyful rhythm. The man Emily chose over me didn't end up in a good place. A couple of weeks following his vanishing, rumors began to circulate that he had been mic-bed outside his beloved bar. The assailants had inflicted severe injuries, resulting in 5 fractured ribs, shattered kneecaps, and numerous lost teeth. He had also lost his wallet and one of his testicles during the attack. Karma appeared to have finally caught up with him, signaling the end of his days filled with carefree deceit. Rachel and I deepened our bond, evolving not only as partners, but also as a family. The children and I immersed ourselves in the fascinating world of koi, spending countless joyful afternoons in the backyard, observing the fish and relishing the serene life we had created together. After all that transpired, it seemed as though we were finally embracing the life we had longed for. Gone were the days of turmoil and trickery. Now, it was all about the pure happiness found in each other's company. One day, Rachel astonished me by revealing a 6-bedroom villa she had purchased nearby, using the funds she'd saved prior to selling her business. The scene was enchanting, featuring a spacious pool that invited us to bask in the warmth of summer days. Rachel had stashed my old Jaguar XK 140 in the garage, tucked away from prying eyes. It had been resting there quietly, anticipating the moment we would finally take it out for a drive along the coast. The day was approaching swiftly. We intended to drive to a beloved French bistro, a place where the 3 of us, myself, Rachel, and the Jaguar, could savor a peaceful dinner and reflect on our journey together. Regarding Emily, last I heard, she was still residing with Susan, attempting to reconstruct her life following Chris's betrayal. Yet, that was her dilemma to contend with now. At last, I had turned the page, eager to embark on a new journey with Rachel beside me, and we were both filled with anticipation for what lay ahead. Thanks for watching this story on Addy Story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share, and hit that subscribe button so you never miss a new tale. Stay tuned for more, and until next time, take care and keep living your own amazing stories.